hadn't struck me until I observed it this morning in her court when I went back, and it was a shelter hearing, and she ordered that the child be removed from its parents. And the mother was having an understandable meltdown. The foster parents were there, DCF was there. Judge Case had to keep control of the courtroom, but it's probably the most important court for decisiveness that you can imagine, because the court, without disparaging, I mean, some of the lawyers that were in there this morning were not ready, partly because it was a shelter hearing and partly because they were not well equipped, and they didn't provide the judge with some of the information that she needed. But we're talking about a child, and we're talking about a dependency issue that if the child goes back and forth 3 times over the course of the next 3 months, it could be devastating to the bonding that occurs. And so a lot of that has to do with walking around sense and gut, but you must be decisive for the benefit and well-being of that child. So long story short, yes, I would welcome that opportunity for a few years for sure.
Well, if you do get appointed to the judgeship, and I hope that you keep your application, if you don't, in, because I think you're an excellent candidate, but if you do get appointed by the governor, you're going to be asked to uphold a different level of judicial ethics and take a judicial oath. Do you have any issues with any of the things that are in the oath or the ethical rules regarding judges?
I don't. I read them at the time of submitting the application, and I read them again in the last couple of days, and browsed them again this morning. I don't. As it turns out, I mean, I don't live a wild and crazy existence, so, and I don't hobnob with folks that are jet-setting around the country, so I don't think it will change significantly the caliber of my private life. There will certainly be some limitations, and in talking with the judges that I can relate to based upon their past experiences. You clearly, your life changes. I'm actively involved in our community, in my Rotary Club. I actively enjoy serving as counsel for some of those programs, and those things will have to stop. You can take a minor role or a back seat or be a member, but I won't miss the fundraising days of those institutions, and I won't miss any of that. But the role changes, and so I would be honored to uphold every one of the virtues that the oath requires.
Judy, could you outline to us some of your pro bono and civic work, even bar work that you may have been involved in?
Sure. A lot. I haven't kept track of it. One of the things in filling out the application that I noticed, I guess you're supposed to keep track of all the hours that you give away and all the work that you do. Currently, right now, I'm a guardian ad litem appointed by Judge Beck. I try to do that from time to time. I typically take 2 to 3 cases from legal aid when they call each year. Through the community, I prefer to get my pro bono cases typically through word of mouth from another lawyer who may know somebody who is well deserving, that may well qualify for legal aid, but may have a more I would say intellectually stimulating, complicated, or challenging legal issue than a standard eviction or something to that effect. One of the most interesting ones I recently did this year was a case involving a father who, and you may have referred it to Julie Osborne, who immediately came back to me, but it involved essentially tortious interference with child custody is what it was. We had a father who was unmarried at a hospital, an intermediary adoption agency attorney came in. The mother surrendered her rights, but the father had never been asked. He was on the putative father registry. But in Florida, and I did not realize that was something that had changed in the last maybe 8 or 10 years since I had looked at it. Unmarried fathers have no rights in this state unless they really rapidly preserve them, and they make a clear effort with the mother both pre-birth and after birth to care for that child. And so I had a young man sitting in front of me. We probably spent 100 hours on it. The adoptive parents already had the baby. They took it from the shelter hearing, and before you knew it, 30 days had gone by, and we had an order denying removal. So we were litigating against probably one of the finest adoption, or most well-known adoption lawyers in the state from Tampa. But ultimately, we worked out a deal where the father agreed that it was in the best interest of the child to go to this lovely family. There was some financial remuneration, but the biggest issue for him was they actually agreed to a custody plan where he could see the child. So those types of things come in all the time.
I heard recently, and I didn't know these, so you don't advertise them, You started an organization, Angels, or something like that?
I did not start it. Some dear friends of mine did. I spent what you probably know about and what most people know. I mean, I spent 10 years on the board of directors of UCP, which is also known as WORC. They changed their name to be clearer. I'm not sure that either of those help. But it helps adults with mental retardation and developmental disabilities. I was president of that organization twice. It was near and dear to my heart. We had some family friends who had a child with mental retardation. Hundreds of hours there. It was a real passion. But I gave that up a couple years ago, and now I work with an agency called Wings of Hope. Tony and Kathy Gouch founded it. Brian's house in DeLand is named after Kathy's son Brian, who died at 19 in a DUI. And they are a private foundation because they really did not know how they were supposed to be set up, and I was a donor to their organization. And so I looked at them, and they really needed to be a 501c3 public corporation, so I'm helping them evolve that. And we're working with the IRS to make it a public 501c3 charity so that people can make tax-free contributions and the like. And so that's my charity of choice these days. David Hood actually taught me, and I've taken it to heart, rather than being on 100 different agencies, pick one or two that you love and give an incredible amount of time so that you can really make a difference. And that's the philosophy I've tried to live by.
How do you see yourself dealing with pro se individuals? I imagine with your practice, you deal a lot with more highly sophisticated individuals and represented parties. How do you see yourself having to, and I'm sure that you saw that this morning in Judge Case's courtroom, the issues that a judge faces when dealing with unrepresented parties?
There's not a whole lot of unrepresented parties that come before you in circuit court. Typically, if they're indigent in criminal court, they get appointed a public defender. At the DCF level, they're appointed an attorney. It would be in circuit court, and I've had adversaries that are pro se, and it'll be much the same way. My job as a judge, I think, or anybody's job as a judge, is to call balls and strikes. And I think at the end of the day, your job is not to litigate the case for them. On the flip side, I think you have to acknowledge that the efficiency of the system, number one, requires some assistance. I think you refer them to counsel if they can find it. I think you can refer them to the library where there's a tremendous number of resources. And I think short of practicing law for them, they absolutely, under the Code of Ethics, a pro se party deserves the same amount of respect, dignity, and courtesy. But you cannot do their job for them. But you can certainly provide them knowledge of where those resources are, and you can certainly make the system more efficient by offering some assistance, non-legal advice.
Do you have any ideas as to how to dealing with the court's efficient running of the system, time management, dealing with the hour-and-a-half wait that a lot of attorneys have to take sometimes when they're waiting for a case to be called?
I wish I did. I'm interested to find out how it works on the other side, but in this age of budget cuts, I don't expect it to get much better. I think going to the electronic filing system may help. I think a court that runs a docket has a tendency to be far more efficient. I think a judge that works as hard as the lawyers do has a tendency to have more time for hearings. And so I think that we know who those judges are, and it always seems to be that they can find or make more times on their calendar to make sure that hearings go through. I think that's why a work ethic and decisiveness is important. I mean, for me, as you know, Raven, that if I'm sitting here waiting for a clerk's office for a summons on emergency injunction for 6 weeks to be returned, what's the point? And I have that now. So part of it's in the clerk's office, but when they're getting staff cuts and they need to make everything electronic, it's going to be tough. But I think it requires everybody to pitch in. I think it requires judges to do a little more than what they may have historically been used to doing. I think it's harder to be a judge now than it has been previously. I don't think you have the law clerks. I don't think you have the support staff. You're going to have the support staff that we've had, but the system needs us to participate in that. But I wish I had a panacea. But I don't, other than working very hard, being efficient, and making sure that you do your part as a judge to to render decisions in a timely fashion and to make yourself available, I don't know what we can do about hour and a half waits, other than just making sure we're doing it.
It's like, you yourself are very busy in your practice, and it's sometimes hard to get a hold of you. How do you think you'd be at case management, time management as a judge?
Well, I think it would be very different as a judge as opposed to as an attorney. A single docket as opposed to multiple dockets is rather appealing. In terms of responding to my 30-day calendar as opposed to 10 different judges' 30-day calendars. I hope, and one of the things I've thought about, I mean, time management is, it's absolutely critical. I mean, it's critical for a judge, it's critical for a lawyer. I would hope that I would not forget as a judge what it's like to be a lawyer. Because I think sometimes judges do forget that. And that would be an important consideration for me, especially for those lawyers that routinely appear before you prepared, well-schooled, and working very hard. In terms of my time management style, the thing that helps me the most in terms of nuances is blocking. I have callback time every day, I have production time every day, I have hearing time, I have deposition time that I try to use every week. You get set for a trial, and that goes out the window. So the key is to get your time management system back on focus if you can when you're not running from one trial to another. But as a trial lawyer, that's been a challenge. So.
I have one other question. You listed a couple of cases, you're required to list trials you've had. And you listed a couple of cases that were, you said trials on injunctions.
Yes.
Do you see those as trials, or do you see those as evidentiary hearings?
It's a good question. I can tell you just from some of the applications I've done before, I see them as trials because they're the equivalent of a temporary hearing on or on a temporary injunction hearing is in fact a day of trial. The courts put it on their trial docket, they take a day of evidence, you have an opening, you have a closing, you have an order that is rendered at the end, and an order that's in place until a final trial comes along. In all of the ones that I've listed, there was also pre-injunction discovery. None of them were shooting off the hip. All of them had interrogatories requested reduced and depositions that were taken previously. And we built up, and some of those injunction hearings I think were 2 or 3 days long. But those are the ones that I listed for that reason.
Any other questions? Do you thank you?
Thank you. I promise you recency, or everybody's very tired from lunch. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but thank you.
End of charge.
Thank you.